Master the 5 virtues in your journey to perfect them before your rivals in Godo The Five Paths.
And today we'll be teaching you how to play Godo The Five Paths, game designed by Vedran Mochibob and published by Snowvid Games.
And hi everyone, it's Stella.
And Tarrant, welcome to Meeple University.
And hey, if you enjoyed this video after watching, like, subscribe and comments, you know what to do. Alright, now let's get to the classroom.
In Godo The Five Paths, players are monks, competing and racing against each other to be the first to increase their spirituality across 5 different virtues: wisdom, kindness, trust, righteousness, and respect. Turn by turn, players will place tiles to build up a common sacred temple, move along the paths to gather virtues, and cash those virtues in for spiritual enlightenment. But cooperative it isn't, as players will lay traps and tricks to impede their opponents and prioritise their own improvements at the expense of everyone else's. The first player to max out all 5 of their tracks will be the winner. To set up, each player takes a path board, flipped to the basic side, showing only the circles, a matching coloured monk figure, and 5 Enso tokens, which are placed on this first space of each of the 5 tracks. Each Enso is a marker representing your spiritual progress in that virtue. Shuffle and make a face-down pile or piles of all of the sacred tiles. You'll now choose a first player and set up the starting portion of the map. And to do this, you'll need to understand tile placement rules, which will also apply throughout the rest of the game. All at once, the first player draws 3 tiles from the stacks, and then arranges them face up in the centre of the table. Each tile must join to at least one other tile along a matching coloured long edge. So this connection would be allowed, but this connection would not. Matching coloured can include the blank edge, so this would be a legal placement. Do note, especially later in the game, every adjoining tile edge must be a match, so you would need a tile like this to fill this gap. Having placed the tiles, the first player now chooses any single intersection, and an intersection is a place adjacent to at least one short edge. Here, for example, there are 5 total intersections. Having chosen the intersection, now take note of each of the virtue icons around it. Here it's 2 reds and a purple. And the player advances their Enso markers along the corresponding tracks. Ignore any other icon you come across for the moment. Only the virtue icons matter during setup. Now the second player, in clockwise order, does a similar step, drawing 2 tiles and legally adding those to the map. They then choose their own intersection, one where no other player's monk is located, and advance on the matching tracks. Any other players do likewise, drawing and placing only a single tile. Once everyone is done, suppose this were a 3-player game, all players draw 2 tiles from the supply and keep them hidden in their hand. You're now ready to play. Godo The Five Paths is played in turns, starting from the first player and going clockwise around the table. Your turn is resolved in up to 6 steps. In order, these are: place a tile, draw a tile, move your monk, improvement, sharing, and mastering a virtue. The first step is place a tile. Choose one of the 2 tiles from your hand and add it legally to the temple, following the same rules described for setup. The second step is to draw a new tile. Simply add a new face-down tile to your hand. The third step is move your monk. Unless it's impossible to do so, you must move your monk at least 1 path, and may move your monk up to as many paths as you want. Each move allows you to move along a path, either a full path or a half path, to the next intersection at the end of that path. You cannot traverse an empty path, so whether this is matched or unmatched, it cannot be moved along in that direction. To move along a path, whether a half or full path, you must move one ENSO token one step down a track into a space showing the appropriate colour. ENSO tokens on the first step give you some flexibility, so I could move this token down to traverse green, purple or blue. Whereas right now this ENSO lets me move only along red. That means right now I have no way of moving along yellow. So for the purple monk, these three paths are all currently uncrossable. You're also not allowed to cross a path that would take you to an intersection containing another monk. So for purple right here, both of these paths are also off limits. As such here, my only legal path is green, and since I must move at least once if able, I must spend this down into the green slot and take that move. In your destination, take a virtue token for each of the flower icons at your destination intersection. So here I would gain one purple. Now decide whether you're going to move again. Every move after the first one is optional, but follows the same costs and restrictions with one extra restriction, being that you cannot immediately double back along the path you just took. If you choose not to move, then your movement phase is over, and you'll move to the improvement phase. And in this particular case, the only valid path is blue. I don't have the ENSO tokens to pay a blue cost, and therefore I must finish moving. However, with the right ENSOs and layout on the board, you can string several moves together to have a very efficient turn. Here, for example, green could spend a blue ENSO to move here, gaining 2 greens and a purple. Spend another blue step to move here, gaining 2 yellows and a blue. Spend green to move here, gaining a blue and purple. And spend this red to move here. Even though this reaches the same intersection twice on a turn, it doesn't break the rules because it was reached in a loop and not by doubling back over the same path. Here green would normally gain 2 green and a purple, but because there's only 3 of each virtue token, green takes only what they can. Based on remaining steps on the track, the only path green could now take would be green, for which there aren't any available, and you cannot spend virtue tokens to take a movement step, so green's movement would have to end here. There are 3 other special icons which can resolve during a movement step. If you start a move step at a location with a gate, you can use that gate by paying an ENSO step of the matching colour, so in this case red, to move to any other intersection that has a gate of a matching or non-matching colour. A fox shrine lets you swap one virtue token for another. So by coming here, I gain 2 red virtue tokens for these icons, but then with the fox shrine, I could swap one for any other virtue. Finally, stone lanterns end your move. So if I paid red to move here, I would gain 2 green and a purple, but I would not be allowed to take any further move steps this turn. If through lack of available steps and blockages you're completely unable to move, then you spend your entire movement step simply gaining 1 step on the ENSO track of your choice. The next steps of your turn are improvement, sharing, and mastering a virtue. First is improvement, and this is where you cash the virtue tokens you've just gained in to increase steps on your tracks. This means they'll now become available for you to spend on future moves. Here I spend 2 blue to move up 2 steps on blue, 1 green to move up a step on green, and 2 of my 3 red to move up the 2 remaining steps on red. The 5th step is sharing. If you have leftover virtue tokens that you've collected, but you can't increase any further, then you share this knowledge and virtue with everybody else. All other players take the step on the corresponding track before the virtue is returned to the supply. Finally, the sixth step is mastering a virtue. If you've reached the final column on any track, remove the ENSO token from it. You have now mastered the corresponding virtue. You can walk along paths of that colour or go through gates of that colour for free for the rest of the game. You now also place the removed ENSO token onto the map, adding it to any intersection which does not already have an ENSO token. This can include one which has a monk, in which case you would place it underneath the monk. ENSO tokens effectively destroy the intersection they were in, and if any player moves to an intersection with an ENSO token, not only does their movement phase end, but they don't get to resolve any icons at that intersection. That is, not the virtue tokens and not the fox shrines. If the player had gained virtue tokens from a previous intersection, they get to resolve those as normal. It's just the intersection which has the ENSO which delivers no benefit. ENSOs do not invalidate gates, and from a space with an ENSO you can pay the appropriate price to move through a gate on your next turn. If, due to sharing, multiple players have mastered virtues in the same turn, you'll resolve these in turn order from the current player. So here on purple's turn, purple would place both these ENSOs, and then green would place this one. The game ends immediately as soon as any one player removes the last ENSO from their track. That player is the winner. The game can also end if all the tiles are gone before that occurs. If you start your turn with no tiles in hand, you simply skip your turn entirely, and if all players are out of tiles, then the game is over. In this case, count up your final score by scoring 10 points per empty track and 1 point per empty space to the left of an ENSO token, including the square. This here would be a final score of 38. The player with the highest score wins, and if tied, victory is shared. Once you've mastered the standard game, you can also play with the Sacred Specialties variant, which uses the other side of your player board, including one special track. You'll find that this will be the track whose final step corresponds to your monk's colour. The first 3 steps of this track no longer show the same colour as the last 2. Instead, each of them shows 3 different colours. Advancing on a track always means spending a colour of virtue token matching a colour on the space you're moving to. So right now, since my first step here is blue, red, yellow, if I were to gain a purple virtue token, I have no ENSO I can move with it, and I would have to end up sharing this with my opponents. On the other hand, if I was spending a yellow token, I would have the choice to either gain this step or this one. As we saw for the standard game, the same applies in reverse. If I were to move backwards into this step, I could move on a blue, yellow, or green path. Whereas only moving back onto these starting spaces, which now contain 2 different colours instead of 3, will allow me to move on the path of my own colour. You can also spend backwards to gain this special ability that you cross, and this is instead of spending it to move on a given path. Spending across here lets you move one ENSO which has been placed on the map to a different intersection, freeing up where it was placed for you to interact. Spending across this step lets you move one tile from the temple to a different location. Its new placement must be legal and you can't split the temple into multiple parts. And spending across this step lets you move someone else's monk to an adjacent intersection. This does not cost any standard path movement and doesn't give the monk who was moved any virtue tokens. It simply moves them out of the way so that you can move to where they were, or moves them somewhere inconvenient if you feel like messing with them.
Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, maybe you'd like to watch this next one. Have a great day. Bye.